learn something new every day.
Yep. Okay.
Not from this film, though, am I right? Segue.
Hey, fuck
Segue.
you, Alex Garland. Fucking British
No,
cunt
that's
making
too
a movie
harsh.
about
That's
America.
way too harsh.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Oscar Buzz. Trevor here, joined by Thomas, and we got another movie review. Everybody loved the Dune Part 2 review so much.
Yeah.
So, but it's been a second. Hasn't been to any things that we felt were big enough to talk about, but we will be talking about more on the stream. But we are talking about Alex Garland's Civil War. Very hotly anticipated. Alex Garland, a very hot and cold filmmaker. We both like Ex Machina a lot, and his other films less so. And this one, we got Jesse Plemons. I'm saying his name first because he absolutely stole this. And you know what I learned?
Yep.
That he was actually cast like 3 days before the film started shooting because the actual actor dropped out, and then Kirsten Dunst was just like, Jesse can do
I've
it.
got a husband.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Nepotism
I did not know
husband.
that.
Nepotism
There you
husband.
go. Good nepotism. That's one of the few examples of good nepotism.
Because I mean, he fucking owned it. Like, Jesus Christ, Jesse. But we also got Kirsten Dunst. We got Wagner Moura. We got Cailee Spainey. Steve McKinley Henderson's quite good in this, and then Nick Offerman plays the president, I guess.
For a few scenes.
For like 2 scenes, yeah. This is obviously very divisive, as a lot of Garland films are. Men was a bit of a rough one, and I think we kind of have to start talking about Men because Civil War feels in a lot of ways like an overcorrection to men.
I'm quite honestly surprised it's been as polarizing as it is. As someone who came out of the film fairly sort of neutral overall, perhaps ironic given
perhaps a bit ironically,
this film deals with. But I thought there were some elements that really worked about it, some elements that worked less so much, but I wasn't getting this feeling that this is a masterpiece or this is complete trash. I really wasn't drawn to either end of the spectrum.
We're actually quite similar, I think, in our overall take.
Yeah, I perhaps liked it a bit more. I get the general impression of that, but whereas Annihilation Men, I didn't like most of it. I thought this was kind of just a mixed bag overall. So that would be my general impression of how they stack up against the rest of Garland's filmography. I think it's far from bad. It's very watchable, is the thing. It's very gripping. It's very riveting the whole time. You're never bored. It spreads out its important sequences. Well, it's a very well constructed film conceptually.
It's technically well done. On paper, it's well done. I think it crumbles a little bit once you examine it. After watching it, I texted you just my immediate thoughts, and you responded, "That's just what you said about Saltburn." And I do in thinking about it more, I do feel quite similar to this as I feel about Saltburn, in that I would happily watch it again. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's very riveting. It's very enjoyable. It's not a bad time whatsoever. It's never a dull moment. But just don't think about the movie. And the problem is that the film wants you to think about it, and the film wants to be, I think, a bit more important than it is fit to be. And that it thinks that it has a lot more bigger ideas, and it might contain those big ideas, but they aren't really fleshed out or constructed in a cohesive manner that allows for you to take away all of these interesting ideas from the project, I think, as a whole.
Yeah, no, I do think Saltburn extrapolates and exemplifies this problem to a greater degree, though I think Saltburn, when it's enjoyable,
but I also think Saltburn is more fun.
Exactly, when Saltburn is enjoyable, it's really hitting, but it really wants to be something that's not. Anyway, with this film, I completely agree. It's very well constructed on paper. I thought the sound stuff really worked. I thought the action, the way that was directed, it wasn't close up. It just allowed us to be really immersed in this action. And I thought it did really put you in the shoes of these, it put you in the vehicle with these four.
I thought the music was really interestingly used, especially with the marriage of a lot of just environmental footage and just showing the atmosphere. And it was really good for world building, especially as a piece that kind of felt like it was. The piece of film felt like it was reflecting on just the tatters of American culture that have been left behind, and I really enjoy films that dive into the different sects of and subsects of American culture, just because it's a cliche, but America is just like a massive melting pot, and there's so many different cultures that come in, and through dubious reasons, different cultures that have been fractured and broken, and it creates just this really, really fucked up like tapestry that has such a distinct feeling. Like some things just feel American, but it's really hard to put a word or to describe what makes them feel American sometimes, just because of how abstract it is. So I in the same way as it's hard to describe what American culture really is, it's hard to describe how I got there, but the film just aesthetically did lead me there in my mind, and it did lead
the
me to
film
American culture.
Feels very American, and I think a lot of that comes through actually the set pieces that it chooses to go for. You've got the one with like the sniper from the church, and it's like set to a backdrop of this very corporatized, I don't really know, fair kind of thing. And like that just feels American. You've got a big sports stadium that's been turned to a
like
refugee
the
camp.
Santa, the Christmas thing that's very hollow, and
like the set piece and the apartment complex as well. As an apartment complex, you only really find those kind of things in America. And so the action set pieces, I think, are very well handled in the way they not only are riveting within their own. I really like the still photography gimmick, almost, if you like, with the film, where sometimes it will just cut to a still photo. I really love that as just a narrative device that sort of fit into what the film was exploring, and I thought the shots themselves, highlighting them, they are very impressive. So I really like that element. But anyway, yes. So the action set pieces, they not only are just gripping within their own right, they also are actively building the sense of tone. They're building the world out, and I think that deserves a lot of compliment. I just think Garland's very capable. He's proven himself a very capable.
I think Garland as a director is very good.
Exactly. Horror stuff he seems to be able to do perfectly or decently.
I wouldn't go perfect.
I know, perfectly. With action stuff as well, I think he's capable in a multitude of genres.
No, and that's where I'll give Garland credit. Like I do think that he's a very good director. I think the storytelling is often where it falters. And I think that was some of the biggest issues here. But just to stay on a couple positive things just briefly before we get into it. Jesse Plemons fucking owned. I thought Cailee Spainey was also quite excellent.
I thought all four of them.
To be honest, just all four, but Cailee Spainey stood out to me. Like I really enjoyed what she was doing in this. Like pushing the Cailee agenda hard after this.
Amazing. Yeah, no, definitely. But I also thought Kristen Dunst as well.
Yeah.
It's a type of performance I've seen her do before, where she's like verging on like likable. She's quite unlikable parts of it. She's like playing a very tight line.
She's very good at playing cold. Like
she's very good at playing cold, but still being somewhat endearing to get you over the edge.
Yes.
And she is very good at, and she can just play those kind of roles for the end of time.
Cailee Spainey is very good at like looking like a teenager. I don't understand how she does that.
Yeah, it took me a minute.
25 years old.
Yeah. I knew that Cailee Spainey was in the film, and I knew that this character looked a bit like it, but I didn't put two and two together until I sort of realized that midway through the film, oh, that's Cailee Spainey.
She genuinely looks like it's crazy. She looks like she's 14. Like
genuinely.
But no, I did really, really enjoy her work in this. So I think that's even a joke in the film that she looks. Yeah, I think Kirsten does.
Yes, I think she was 23 apparently.
Yeah, she was 23.
Given.
Yeah.
I don't see it personally.
No, my friend who I saw it was like, why are they taking the kid?
Yeah. No, I don't know.
But no. Okay, to get into some slight negatives now. Womp womp. The screenplay as a whole, you know exactly where it's going the entire time, and there are certain beats in the plot where it just feels like, well, of course that had to happen to get to the next beat that we know is coming. Like I think it's saved by Garland being just a very incredible at constructing atmosphere and constructing these tense, feelings. But then as soon as like those action set pieces end, you do just go back into, okay, so now we're just going to the next beat that, we've seen this type of thing before. We know exactly what's coming. I mean, we've seen like Children of Men, right? We've seen it, you know, that's just like the big example, but there's been plenty of films that have done this exact same thing, and Civil War doesn't really, I guess, diverge itself from a lot of other films that are in this genre. And I think it had the opportunity to, with some of its like thematic work that I felt was a bit lacking, and it just did, you know, it could have been a lot more, but it just felt like a well-directed, just bang standard, I guess, version of this type of film. So that was a bit disappointing, and I didn't, you know, I wasn't like, oh, it needs to, you know, say what its political opinions are. No, not necessarily, but I do think that you have to at least say something if you're going to be tackling an idea like this. And I think that this film really struggled to say something without immediately contradicting itself for the sake of the plot.
So that is the point I would push slightly against. The first point you make, I would agree with. I think the film sort of just leaves you unsatisfied in the fact that it doesn't really go anywhere. Like,
yeah,
we're doing spoilers, right?
Yeah, I'll go for spoilers. Yeah.
Yeah. So the president is shot at the end. Mm-hmm. And that's really the only ending they could have ever done. It writes itself into
there's no way you can end the film in any other way.
There's no way you can end the film in any other way. There's no way you can extend it past the credits, past that moment, really. But
and you also, I'm sorry, you knew the entire time that Kirsten Dunst's character was going to die. Sorry to cut you, but you knew the entire time that was going to happen. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, so I do like some of the smaller moments, and I do think they are there to flesh out this world, flesh out the dynamics, and touch on some of the ideas. Like, I liked the smaller moments where the plot did allow it to breathe. It does get a bit repetitive, maybe a little bit, but I do think it's quick enough and it is paced well enough where it's not a major problem. The problem is, by the time you get to the end, you're just left thinking, oh, we've reached the end. That feels like a natural end, but it hasn't said anything. It really hasn't gone to the places it could have gone. Having said that, I don't think it needed to go there necessarily by surrounding itself in political context. I think the point is that it is apolitical. The point is that it is neutral. So yeah, the conversation between Joel and the soldier that is shooting at the church, and he's like, what side are you fighting for? And it's a secular conversation. It doesn't go anywhere because that's the point. Like, there's no point to being neutral when people are just being alienated to one side. You've got to pick a side in many ways. And I think that is the point of the film. It's not surrounding itself in deliberate political content. I can see why people would be dissatisfied at this. As a person maybe recommending this film to people to watch, it's not necessarily what a lot of people would expect. Going in, I think a lot of people are thinking this is like going to be a big world building thing where like we'll get political manifestos from
it's a lot more. And like, for the record, when I'm criticizing the film, I also am not wanting it to be that. I don't think it has to be that, but I do think that there is a much more nuanced and interesting way to approach what it was going for, I guess.
I think it could have expanded on it, but I still think what it is doing fundamentally works. I think it should have been expanded on, it should have been given more room, but what we have make the elements of something that's still very satisfying to watch in general.
And like, again, judging the film purely on what it is, like, it's fine. I think it's decent. But I think when you feel that a film is just decent, you do have to look at, okay, why didn't I think this was good? Why didn't I think this was great? Why did I think it was just decent? And when you, I think, challenge your own, I guess, initial thoughts about a film, then you can arrive at, some of the places where you think that the film could have gone better. Because I know that's a thing, like, judge a film for what it is, not for what it could have been. But I do think that you kind of have to do that too. Understand why.
And I do agree with doing that specifically with this film, which it's a very provocative film in many ways.
Yes.
It's very deliberate.
It's wanting you to think about these things.
It's very
and I think the frustrating thing is that I don't think it entirely earns it all of the way.
No. I think there is enough there in terms of just building the atmosphere. Also helps to convey just the horrors of this kind of violence and this kind of response to political disillusionment. But yeah, I agree. There is stuff that is left on the table with this film, which I think does have to.
I think the best thing
like this.
The strongest scene in the film was the Jesse Plemons sequence, and I think that captured more of the nuances than the rest of the film. Like, it wasn't just Jesse Plemons, like being Jesse Plemons and being amazing, but like there is, it's bold and it's really strong with, I think, what it's saying, but it is a bit more nuanced, whereas the rest of the film just feels a bit like soft and blunt. Like, it's trying to be, and Garland has said this, he's trying to just say like, okay, it's objective, it's staying in the center, it doesn't matter the sides, right? Which I think the best, probably the best war film of all time with Come and See does exactly that. The entire point is that it's just, you don't even know who's on whose side. It's just the horrors of the war around. But I think that earns its horror by letting you just feel it, whereas this does this kind of halfway thing where it's trying to like exposit and like do exposition around it, but then also not trying to entirely build out the whole world because there isn't that much there to flesh out. And I think it's caught in this weird place where like it's trying to be objective, but I think, okay, you can look at it as it's just, that's the point of the film, is to be objective. But I think in trying to be objective, it only highlights the subjectivity of it all, and like this entire situation is obviously incredibly like complex and can be incredibly dynamic and all these types of things in the way that you can explore it. And if you don't want to look at that, sure, but it feels like you're saying just, okay, this is the thing, pointing to other thing that is right over there, but let's not touch that, let's just stay here. And if that's the case, then why point at the other thing?
Interesting. I wouldn't quite make the comparison with a historical film, because I do think this can't completely.
I was more using that as a qualification for how I do think that this can work, not as a way to compare.
But I guess this needs the world building in a way that a film like Come and See doesn't, and it does necessitate this kind. And I do appreciate the way it doesn't bog itself down in exposition. It never came across to me as expositional in a way that it could have done. Like, a lot of the dialogue could have been very, this is what is happening here, this is what's happening.
Bad. I just think
it's not. Yeah, sure, but I do appreciate the way it did stray away from being overly explanatory and really explaining every detail of it. Like, you didn't need to know that to get the atmosphere and to be delivered the same results at all. That would have just bulked out the film in a way I didn't want to see. I wanted to see the film bulked out in terms of the ideas and the interplay between characters, not in that way.
Which I also don't think it gets there with the ideas as well. And I'm just saying, like, I feel like it was almost that, it was at least almost there with the world building, whereas I feel like it didn't even get going down the path of the ideas.
I don't know, because I do think there is something there as well with photojournalism and this idea of that plays through of, would you shoot my dying moments? And then obviously that situation.
That just felt kind of cheesy and cheap to me.
I don't know, because it's exploring this idea of, can you be completely divorced from this? Can you hold back from emotion from this? And in the same way, the film is sort of challenging in a way to, can you divorce it from these political contexts? Can you be truly objective? I do think there is an interesting through line there, as well as just the idea of I like the way it's very traditional in the way that each character brings a different perspective onto the theme. It's very
and I guess
tight.
This is also where we kind of separate, where it did just like, there was a lot of things where it just felt like, oh, this is just, how you're supposed to write a screenplay. And there were points where characters did just feel like they were a bit one note, in that, like, oh, they're there specifically to serve this purpose in the narrative. And, oh, this sequence is specifically for this payoff. And there's no, like, that's fine, but like there's no underlying purpose. And again, I don't think that every single film has to have an underlying purpose, but when the film is clearly wanting to be this like greatly thought about and very provocative thing, I feel like each of the sequences does have to kind of work towards an overarching goal. And I didn't really feel like those overarching themes really paid off in the end.
Yeah, whereas I guess that's not a major problem for me. Where I find a problem in the sort of perfect construction of this screenplay is that it feels too artificially created in a way. It lacks the sort of rawness that I kind of wanted from this film. it doesn't feel necessarily sort of boots on the ground in a way I think that it wants to be. So I do think it is fundamentally failing slightly on what it was trying to be.
Which is where the contradiction comes in, though, because like aesthetically, it does have that feeling.
Exactly, it does bring you in, and it does.
And this is the thing with Garland's stuff, where like the narrative doesn't always agree with the direction. I think.
Yeah, there's just something slightly artificial about it, which I do think it is able to shed off in moments. But there is still that prevailing sense, especially through the slower scenes, where I feel like these characters are placed in this position to talk about this. The stuff they're talking about is interesting. The way it's shot is interesting. But I can still very much tell the purpose of it at all times.
Right.
Like I felt ahead of Garland at all times in this film.
Yes.
As a spectator.
And one of our friends of the show, Anthony, I remember him. We had a conversation in our group chat. And he said this in his letterbox as well. He said at points it feels like a comedian getting you to laugh by tickling you, which sure they achieved the goal, but does it really count? And I probably butchered exactly what he said, but I feel like that's kind of what Garland's done. Like he's provoked us, but I think in the most kind of cheap and straightforward way possible, without any sort of nuance, which means that sure, it's provoked you for the moment and it's provoked you while watching. But I think that's why both of us have really come away from the film not really thinking about it all that much, because for as politically provocative as it is, there's really nothing to grab onto past the credits.
No. Having said that, I would caveat that by saying I think Garland has created a very visceral, very immersive,
and that's the
experience. So that's the end of the day. It's a sort of paradox of a film in many ways. And I've ended up feeling a lot more neutral than, as I said at the top, a lot more neutral about it than perhaps a lot of the polarized reactions to it would suggest.
I mean, I've seen Masterpiece thrown around, and I've also seen like worst movies thrown around. Like, and
I really don't get how you're.
I don't get how you're getting either side of that. And
like, I think if you think it's a masterpiece already, you'll eventually soften on it. If you think it's a waste of space and should never be made,
probably grow on you.
I think you'll eventually, exactly.
So just return to the mean.
I know it's that kind of thing though, because it is a film that is deliberately provocative and it's deliberately reactionary. But I just don't see why
in every way
such.
To kind of tie back to where we kind of started with this conversation. It does feel like a response to Men in a lot of ways, if you look at Garland's filmography, because Men as a project, it goes a lot of places. It's tackling a lot of ideas, and by the end, you never really get a clear grasp on what it's trying to be. Like all of the ideas just feel muddled. And
to the point of incoherence, where you can tell that something is happening in front of you. And again, it's not boring. It's not a boring experience. But it never quite weaves itself together.
Right. And again, it goes to a lot of interesting places that, I've thought about Men a lot after watching it. Not always.
Some of the images are still stuck in my head, which is the same, I think, for this film. I think a lot of the images, a lot of the sequence, a lot of the moments are stuck in my head.
I think the difference is like Civil War in comparison. It knows exactly what it wants to be, but it never really expands out of that. And because of that, it never really goes to a lot of the places that Men does. And I think it's a bit better for it. But it feels like, if Men's like over here, line up my hand. Okay. Men's like over here, and then the correction is like here. It feels like it's gone a little bit past the correction to an overcorrection, and it's still better. It's still closer to like where it should be, but it feels like it's leaped a little too far over the line to be a bit more like blunt and a bit less bold, I think. Yeah.
Men is a film that challenges you to catch up, and the challenge is just too difficult for everyone. Whereas this is a film that just doesn't even, it stays behind you.
It's right. It's a marathon, but you're like 10 miles ahead. Like
exactly that kind of thing. But like you still know it's still comforting the fact that it is behind you and it's
still catching up.
Anyway, we've taken this allegory.
It's so far gone. Anyways,
to wrap up, I would be looking at, if we're giving it a score, I'd be looking at probably at this point a 7 out of 10, just based on the theatrical experience. This is one I would highly recommend seeing in a theater. I never say that about a lot, but if you can see it, this is definitely one, because you're never going to get a better watching experience than in a theater. You're never going to get a better watching experience. So
absolutely, I'm at a 6 out of 10. Very similar thing. See it in the theater, form your own opinion, all that thing. As far as Oscars, get Jesse Plemons a fucking nomination. Probably it won't happen though. If anything, this is gonna get like a sound nom or like just
if anything, I mean, it did very well on week 1. We'll see if that word of mouth momentum can keep it sustained. I don't believe it will. I don't think the cinema score was great off of this. If I remember,
no, got like a B+. I think it was actually quite good. Well, B+ isn't amazing.
It's kind of middling, yeah. But anyway, yes. In terms of awards, I don't think it'll do amazingly. Maybe yes. If text, then probably sound would be the tech. Sure. I don't imagine it would go much further. Maybe like production design. I don't know. There are quite a lot of the sets are quite impressive, but it probably would never get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's its awards journey. It's not going to be a major contender, as none of Garland's films really ever have been.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Is that Civil War? Have we talked about the Civil War?
I think we talked about the Civil War, yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you, everybody, for watching the Civil War. We will be streaming sometime soon. Maybe we already have by the time you watch this, and we'll be talking about all of the things recently, and then we'll do early Oscar predictions. We have been busy lately with life, but should be back to a decently normal recording schedule sometime soon. But until next time, thank you, everybody, for watching. Stay safe, and goodbye.